Okay, welcome to Fantasy Talk. This is episode 4. We're joined today by a solitary llama, formerly of Cloth 5, and of course, myself and Lynx as normal. And today we're going to cover basically everything that's happened in the past 2 weeks that has turned League of Legends and Fantasy LCS into a landmine of randomness. And of course, myself. Yeah. So, if you've been watching games over the past 2 weeks, you might have noticed that no teams that you would expect to be at the top seem to be doing that well, really with the exception of, like, TSM, I guess, and Fnatic, and...
Well, I don't think anyone expected Fnatic.
Yeah, no, sorry, Elements, yeah, okay, but yeah. Well, it's hard to imagine Fnatic out of the top 2, so it's just weird to think that way. So... we're just going to cover all of the various upsets that have been having, which is basically every game. Who's doing better or worse than expected? Do you have any particular, like, big upsets that you've been thinking of, Anthony?
I think the biggest upset, most obvious one would be Team Liquid. The second upset definitely would be Giants. I think a lot of us, including myself, probably ranked or hyped them up this week, and they were a big letdown. I don't even know how to go from here. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but got to be an upset this week. Going forward, might have to temper our expectations a little bit. I mean, what do you think, Chris?
Definitely Giants. That was huge. Like, you go from earning like 30 points a game on Warlib, and then you earn 1 for a week, and like there's no way that we were able to like expect that, especially with the teams that they were playing were both pretty bad, I guess, from looking at week 1.
So for me, the Giants never, I guess hindsight is 2020, but the Giants never seemed super strong for me from a fantasy perspective because their strategy was basically Frederick, I can't say that on air. Frederick camps Warlib, and Warlib gets fed, and Jax is insane, and they win. And even Jax never puts up, like, huge fantasy stats, just because he's always off in his little 1v1 bubble, right? So,
Right.
especially if you're looking at, say, Adri, he was kind of awful in week 1. And so for them to lose, obviously he did worse in week 2 than he did in week 1. But... for me, that's less of a surprise than Team Liquid just going from, like... I mean, Dominate put up, like, 80 points or something in week 1. And then just completely fell off into the middle of nothing. But going back to the Giants, they had 2 early wins against pretty weak teams. And I don't feel like it's a huge surprise to see them then just disappear off into nothing. At least at their lower positions. What's weird to me is how poorly Pepinero did.
Right, and it wasn't just disappear into nothing. They were completely the worst team in terms of fantasy. Even with Team Liquid,
Yep.
with their meltdown, with whatever happened, they did not feed on the same level as Giants did. Giants was taking it to Gambit level, literally, because they actually tied Gambit for the most deaths given up in the entire week 2 in all of LCS. Both at 41 deaths. They were not just bad. They made the other teams look even better than they should have, in my opinion.
Adri put up 1 point over the 2 games. not each, combined 1 point. So for me, the question is, we saw the super dominant Giants in week 1, where Jax was unbanned, and then we saw, like, trash Giants in week 2. It feels like one of those is going to set the tone for their season. Do we think that people have figured the Giants out and we're just not going to see anything out of them? Or was week 2 sort of one of their harder weeks and we think they're going to come back in the future?
I definitely think week 2 is going to be more representative of the entire season there. Probably not as bad. Like, they're not going to repeat week 2 exactly, but I think their schedule doesn't get much easier for the rest of the season. Like, their first 2 weeks were pretty easy, just looking at, like, EU, but...
Right. It's not like they had an egregious week last week.
Yeah, they haven't played SK. They haven't played Fnatic. They haven't played Elements. They're gonna have a rough couple weeks coming up.
Yeah, to me it just feels like a huge risk to even think about picking up picking up Giants for really the next 2 weeks until they have those easy matchups of like H2K, and even against H2K they were
No, they were
they
against
were horrible.
They were against H2K. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was thinking
and that's
week one,
exactly
where they
the
had,
point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They
Pretty sure
were
that's why
against
everyone recommended
H2K.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were against H2K, UOL. Neither of those teams are going to be top 3. I mean, it's pretty solid, at least at this point in time, right after week 2, that top 3 and are by far better than everyone else. There's a huge drop-off behind Fnatic, SK, and Elements. So then if you're taking that into account, really, they've been facing middle-of-the-road or worse teams, and they really just looked bad. I mean, it's just not fantasy-wise. They just played poorly, too.
Okay, so taking the other side of the coin, H2K and Unicorns of Love both had a pretty rough first week, but they've since come back in part because of that victory over the Giants. So I find it hard to hype them because they really just beat a team that we've kind of trashed as being like higher lower tier, right? They're like the 8th place team or something. And so of just Europe. And so it seems one might want to hype H2K or Unicorns of Love. I even thought about picking up their AD carry, just because I have to admit this. In one of my leagues, I have Adri on the bench, and I thought I'm going to drop Adri, and I was looking at the AD carries left, and I've got Hjarnan, and Core JJ.
Oh.
Yeah, ugh. Pinoy. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who the 4th one is, but like it almost doesn't matter at that point. I think it's not Maple Street. It must be Apollo. And actually, of those 5, like Apollo is the better choice.
Apollo's actually not bad right
Wiz
now.
Fusion is the savior of my bench. That's how.
You mean Apollo?
Apollo, yeah,
Apollo,
sorry,
yeah.
Apollo.
The Greek god.
That's definitely not Wiz Fusion.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I obviously gave a pretty strong opinion there. What do you guys think of? Let's start with H2K.
Chris, you want to go?
Yeah.
Oh,
let's go
yeah,
right to
I'll
left
go.
area.
Let's see. H2K, I don't know. I was really surprised when they won both their games coming up. Like, Ryu hasn't looked good for a year, I guess. Like, then he's starting to at least do well. I forgot who they played against last week. They played Giants and
Meteor Makers.
Meteor Makers. Oh, okay. So, I think...
Explains a lot.
Yeah.
Like, they might be able to do decent, I guess, this week. They're playing SK for one of their games, so they're going to probably get trashed there. But they're playing Gambit as well. So, like, they might just be able to get a solid 20, 30 point, like, probably 30 points total for the week.
Right, one good game, one bad.
One good game, one pretty bad game. But I don't see them being, like, a nice long-term option.
I don't think you really have to worry about them as a long-term option.
Yeah.
Because you can pick them up and then drop
You
them.
could probably put... Yeah.
And it's not like someone's going to be like, oh man, guys.
Oh, man,
somebody dropped
someone-
Yarn in. I'm going to snack that guy up. Like, it's just no one's excited about those players, especially at the
Yeah.
more, at the lengthier sub positions like top and jungle. So Lulex might be a contested pick. Ryu might be. Hjarnan, probably not. Voidal, probably not.
Boyle's was definite not.
Odo Omne, probably not. I mean, so it doesn't. It doesn't feel like you have to be drafting those people for the long run. I think you can kind of just pick them up on their good weeks. But the issue is, how, when you're looking at these teams, do you know what their good weeks are? Because, I mean, the Giants took down 2 teams that we thought would be okay, and then lost to H2K. Like, it just seems like a coin toss. Whatever game they're going into between those 2 teams, you could get 40 points or you could get 1.
Yeah, I don't think you can really predict a good week for H2K. I mean, in hindsight, Meteor Makers and Giants. Well, Meteor Makers we knew what they were getting into, but at least Giants looked good on paper, right? Or looked like a good team, so it'd be not a terrific matchup for fantasy wise. But look at week 1; they were against the Wolves, and we all think that they're at middle of the road, lower tier, middle of the road at best, right? Even on paper, their stats aren't that great either, and they weren't putting up numbers against the Wolves like they did against Giants and Meteor Makers either. So I'm not really sure.
Not everyone thought Copenhagen Wolves were middle of the road. I still believe. Airwax, the dream.
Yes, right after you drop them week 1. I can tell how much you believe in them.
Whoa, they served their purpose. Their week 1 matchup was great, and then they were gone.
Okay, so a very conditional belief in Copenhagen Wolves. But going back to my point, H2K, they're not consistent enough for me to even warrant that chance. I mean, if you're really considering them, that means that you're gonna have to be dropping some player or that's worse than them. And despite their week 2, I don't know who you're gonna really drop to pick up H2K players. You might drop Dig players. You might drop Gambit players. But if those teams or if those players were on your team to begin with, it's not like you were. You've been doing really well. I mean, H2K is not going to save your team if you're dropping the likes of Gambit and Dig for them.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope if you have Dignitas anywhere, you've got just the most stacked team elsewhere.
But yeah, like if you're going to be relying on H2K to save you in a week, I think if you're down to a coin flip if they do well or not, that's probably the best chance you're going to get.
Mm.
Like, I wouldn't put my faith in H2K with any of the other players that you could probably pick up that a lot of people are just kind of ignoring. But we could probably move on to that later.
That leaves us with the Unicorns of Love, which are a team that a lot of people have been more legitimately hyping, I think, than Giants and H2K. They took down TSM, who's starting to look like the number 1 team in North America at IEM San Jose, and they haven't had quite the 0-2-2-0 thing that Giants H2K have going on, but they still don't seem like they can go toe-to-toe with any of these top teams.
Well, Unicorns of Love, I'm actually having them as my sleeper pick for pretty much the rest of the season here on out. Yeah, start of the season I ranked Power of Evil as 3rd best mid laner to take. Probably regretting it a little bit, but he's still really good, and Unicorns of Love have shown that they're pretty good. They've had a really rough first 2 weeks they've played 2 of the top teams already. They also won against Gambit and CW, I think. Who was it? No, Giants. The Giants. We just discussed that. Yeah. But they play CW and Fnatic now this coming week, so they're probably gonna do well against CW and have a nice kill fest with Fnatic, like Fnatic tends to do.
So part of the reason actually that I didn't want to draft from Unicorns of Love was precisely that. They have this very even schedule throughout the season, where every week they face this team that's terrifying, and then this team that's bad. And it just feels like you're always going to get 25 or 30 points from Unicorns of Love. And that could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing, because you're not going to get any of those massive gains like you are with, say, Fnatic, or, So looking at that sort of thing, which do you think is better? A team that you know is going to have mediocre points week in and week out, or a team that you know is going to have really good weeks and really bad weeks, and you hope you try and guess the right ones? Anthony, let's start with Anthony.
So, definitely, over the course of the season, having a consistent team is always a good choice, because as long as you're consistently putting up points, it all comes down to matchups, right? Let's say that within your league of 8 people, you're consistently placing anywhere from like maybe second to fourth, right? That means at any given week, you're gonna be at the worst, like around the middle, or a little bit better than that. And depending on matchups, really, even if unless you're the highest scoring team, there's a chance you'll lose anyway, just due to matchups, right? So as long as you're consistent, you're beating at least half your league. You should end up pretty good record. If you don't, you probably got really, really unlucky with matchups. But overall, I don't think it's very exciting to own a team like that. Myself, I love the kind of LMQ-esque players. If you look at last split, LMQ were basically feast or famine. When they hit the points, they hit it big, and that's always exciting to see. They can single-handedly carry your entire fantasy team. It all comes down to play style. If you want to win, probably consistency is better. But if you want to have fun, that's another thing.
I find those gaps like really painful because in one league I was watching Chris and Impaler and Mash, and I think I needed them combined to get like 20 points in my last game to win, and they got like 100 points combined, and I was like just sitting there, and then I look at my other league and like Xpecial and Adri and Team Liquid are just like, here's 5 points, buy yourself something nice. And like it doesn't feel good because I'm like, oh, I won one of my leagues, I guess, and let's just not talk about the other. I don't know, I'd rather have a good showing in every league and like feel okay about it than just every week know I'm gonna have one league where I got completely trashed. Jumping across the pond, since I just brought up Team Liquid, we've got TSM and CLG, which kind of look like the top teams right now, and you could argue for Gravity, but they don't really have the pedigree that those other two teams have, so I'm gonna put them in our maybe group. So we've got basically Team 8, Team Impulse, Team Liquid, Winter Fox, Gravity, and even, this seems weird to say, Cloud9, as teams that were like, I don't know? So I'm going to ask each of you to pick 2 of those teams to hype. I guess one from each of you to start. Who do you think the top 2 teams of those 6 are?
Chris, you want to go?
Top 2 teams of
Team 8, Team Impulse, Team Liquid, Winter Fox, Gravity, and Cloud9.
Alright. We're just talking like LCS wise.
Well,
right?
No, I mean like
fantasy wise? Yeah. Fantasy wise, alright. Not Cloud9 then. Not Cloud9. They're fantasy dead zone. Like when they do well, they just shut everyone out of points because they out-rotate everyone.
Yeah.
I'd have to say, I think Winter Fox might actually be able to be one of the top teams for fantasy-wise there. Gravity also looks pretty good. Sometimes they'll go slow in games, but that's probably only going to affect them much when the other team's just going to lie down and die. Right. Dignitas, but... but, like... I think Gravity and Winter Fox would actually probably be the top 2 teams from there, just consistently scoring you a lot of points.
Okay. I have a thought on that, but I'm going to move to Anthony first. Your top 2.
So you want 2, right? Not just the first one?
No, just 2.
Alright. So my 2, starting with my first one, is definitely Gravity. I like Gravity in the preseason. I thought that their mixture of kind of new talent and veteran leadership kind of meshed well, and the team kind of looked like they were on the same page, despite not being like just a team that jumps off the page at you. Honestly, I think they might be the middle of the road, kind of a little bit above average team in actual LCS, but that's a good thing for fantasy to me, because a team that would just, win hard and shut everyone out and win fast isn't likely to give you that many points consistently because they're too good, right? I like the teams that are good enough to win, but still bad enough to throw. Because you look at Gravity, you got Saint there. You got mainly Saint to me, and maybe sometimes Keen and his YOLO plays where they can just throw and prolong the game. And as long as they come back, that's fantasy points. That's extra, a couple of assists for another team fight. I like that in my fantasy players. I definitely think Gravity is not that great of a team, but pretty good potential, pretty good consistency in fantasy. My second team within that group, definitely Team Liquid. I know that they look bad. It's kind of like, can we even trust them at this point? But you look at Curse from last split. They were good, but they had their ups and downs. It looks like they have improved their ceiling, but definitely they still could look just as bad as any time during the last split. I think overall things will even out. They may turn into something like LMQ from last split, Feast or Famine. Overall, I think what we've seen in week 1 is more indicative of the overall season-long performance than week 2.
Okay, so you guys both put Gravity, and you're between Team Liquid and Winter Fox. I feel like I'm gonna leave Gravity off my list, and my reason for that is they're currently 3-1, and 2 of their wins are against Dignitas, who I think everyone agrees is just sort of the worst LCS team that isn't in Gambit or Copenhagen. I don't know. Everyone's bad, apparently. But they're certainly the worst team in North America right now. From a fantasy perspective, especially. And another one of their wins was against Team Coast, who, as we know, kind of has a problem with winning game. Like, they were ahead that whole game, and they were like, no, you go ahead and win. And then, like, they also beat Cloud9, who, as we've seen, has been this super disappointing team for the first 2 weeks. So for me, I don't really feel them being tested as a team yet, because they haven't played anyone that really constitutes competition. Their one loss even was to Winter Fox. So for me, I feel like it has to be Team Liquid. Team Liquid seems good, but they also haven't beat any real teams, right? They took down 2 mid-tier teams and then lost to Cloud9 and TSM. So I'm actually gonna say Team 8.
Team 8.
Because the way they play, yes, they are pretty dependent on, like, Cali Trolls, but when they snowball, they know how to snowball appropriately. We saw that versus TSM, where, like, Slushy got 1 or 2 kills, and then they didn't win quickly. They had, like, 40 team fights, but they won eventually. And when they lost to CLG, it was a very similar game. They just seem to be a team that they win or lose based off of team fights, and that means there's always going to be lots of points for them to have. I think my second team is Winter Fox, because they, at least Alltech and Pobelter, who are the people that are going to be drafted from Winter Fox, just put up crazy points in their wins. Even Helios was like 5-0-40 in their... I picked him up randomly and then was like, I'm not starting Helios, and I was watching that game just being like, oh, I should have put all those points in. So they seem like a team that's, again, a really aggressive, kill-oriented team. And that's what I think is good for fantasy, is teams that aren't good at playing the objective game. They just know how to win. One team I feel like people might be confused that we left off of this list entirely is Coast. And I just want to clarify that we don't think Coast is a bad fantasy pick. Coast is a team that is so bad they're good. They're incapable of winning games, but they get such good early leads, and they lose so slowly, and then they just throw. So, like, they get crazy points and then lose. So, Coast is not below those teams. Coast is definitely above all of those teams in fantasy. They are kind of one of the top.
We pretty much know what they bring, right?
Yeah, they bring constant action followed by a throw.
Yeah, I think Coast is now the new Church of Millennium, I guess. Now that Millennium's gone, just pick up your Coast players, and then watch as the throw happens, and you have a nice 50-minute game with team fights everywhere.
It does hurt to watch those throws. It really does. But
I like watching the numbers go up.
they go up and up and up, and then you're like, you get up for a second, and you come back, and you're like, wait, the game is over? Oh. So looking at all of those teams, I think that's where you're really going to find your players to drop and hold. What do we think the top kind of players that are going to be on most waiver wires to pick up are? Because I think it's easy to talk about, oh, you should play this player, oh, you should play this player, but in most leagues, Impaler's already on someone's team, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Fnatic is at this point on someone's team. No one ever didn't draft Elements or SK Gaming in their leagues. All of these players are all picked up. So, what are the players that are likely to be on benches? Or sorry, on the ad drop list that you can go pick up?
Definitely depends on the league size, because
Yeah, let's assume an 8-man league for now, just to get the most
Assuming
competitive
8-man.
picks.
all right. Say one that might be probably 50% of 8-man leagues, if people aren't really paying attention, would be Jesus for Coast, because everyone at the start of the season's like, oh, it's Jesus. He was worse mid EU. He was holding SK back. He's washed out. Like, why is he coming to NA? So everyone's got their own thoughts on Jesus before. So people probably didn't draft him, and then no one really thought to replace a mid laner with Jesus. So I think he might probably be on at least some waiver wires.
I feel like you were just quoting me there. Don't pick Jesus, he's terrible. Oops.
Yeah, no, I said that exact thing about Link, and Link might be another one of those.
For me, the big one is Link. I looked through my waiver wire after week 1, and Link was not drafted in 4 of my 5 leagues. And I was just like, wait, he just put up 50 points. I even saw someone drop him after week 1. It was just like, and I didn't pick him up. So, I mean, maybe I'm equally guilty. Anthony.
I think for me, I saw Mash on a lot of waiver wires. I think he was available in at least half my leagues. Got to pick him up. He's not anywhere near the bottom tier of AD carries. Another one might be Saint, actually, following my Gravity hype. Saint, I don't think he'll be the top scoring player or jungler in any given week, but if you got the likes of Airwalk still, or you just struggling to find some consistency, Saint, I think, will be consistent sort of points, but you got to temper your expectations there. And like you said, Link's still available in a couple leagues out there. I like that recommendation as well.
Okay, I'm gonna dig deep into the waiver wire for my first one here, and it definitely has to be Apollo, actually. And I know I have trash talked Wiz Fusion to no end. I know he changed his name just to avoid being known as Wiz Fusion, but he's actually been playing a little bit better in these past couple of games with him get their shit together. Like, the game they lost, correct me if I'm wrong, this was to CLG, where they ran the full 4-man wave swap on the top tower, and he's level 1 and just teleports in into that 1v4 and dies, and you're like, Impact. I know we're American players and you're Korean and thus you're better than us, but you can't 1v4 at level 1. And for me, that mistake determined the game so much that it was impressive that Team Impulse did anything at all this week. I feel like once they get a lot of that miscommunication out of the way, there's going to end up being a surprising amount of fantasy points, and AD carries are typically the hardest role to find on the waiver wire. Yeah. I would wager 95% of leagues. No, let's say 90% of leagues right now have Apollo on the waiver wire.
Mine definitely doesn't, because I think I just added him, but...
Sneaky move.
Just because he put up decent points. He's on a team that is made up of a lot of solid players, right? Xiao Wai Xiao, Impact, Rush promises to be very good, and Adrian is that first guy really to get the scholarship for
Right.
League of Legends. So it's like kind of this power core team. I feel like eventually we'll start to see something out of them. We saw some signs of life this week when they took down
Teammate, I think.
yeah, and Teammate has looked okay, right? They went even
It
with
looked okay.
CLG until they lost, and they beat TSM. So like they look like this team that's shown signs of promise, and Team Impulse took them down. So I feel like Apollo will get you decent points. We all listed, I believe, North American players there. So let's hop over to Europe. What's a player that's likely to be on the bench in Europe that you're going to want to pick up?
We mentioned him earlier, Lulix though for H2K. I'm just seeing him like you open up your fantasy thing and it says top scorers week 2. You have what was it, Reckless #1, and you just go down and then you see Lulix and he's not on a team for pretty much every league. You have him at number 4 right there, 55.58 points there, and I'm pretty sure he's not on a team in your leagues. He's not on a team in any of my leagues.
Definitely. I mean, it's a little risky to pick up a jungler
It's a little
as,
risky,
like, a
but
backup just because you probably have a great jungler already. But if you don't, Lulex is like bound to be open.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have picked up Lulex before last week. Anthony?
Really quickly before I start on my picks, I think I saw on Twitch chat that someone recommended Coast Chris. Really good choice, but I doubt he'll be still available in many leagues out there. If he is, snatch him up right away. Now going to my EU pick, I definitely think if you have Mr. Rallis or Mimer dropped in one of your leagues, definitely good pickups on the bench. You saw Blizzard is going back to being a sub or leaving MYM completely. Getting a new mid laner, they might get lucky and hit on an unknown talent or a very hungry retread. And it might change a lot. A strong mid laner will do wonders for a team. Just look at any other team with strong mid laners out there. They can have potential to bounce back. You wouldn't want to play them anytime soon, but if they're dropped, they're worth a flyer.
Yeah, Mimer and Rallis were both really solid fantasy picks last season, so if Meet Your Makers can return to anything of what they did last season, it's worth even just having those as those bench players, like you said.
yeah.
Next week, maybe not the week, they do play against Elements and Rockhat, who... Rockhat may be 1-3, but they've had a pretty tough schedule thus far. So... But in the future, they could definitely be...
Right. Definitely don't want to play on week 3, no matter how desperate you are.
All right, Chris, who's your super secret? You can pick him up in your other leagues first. Don't worry. EU
All right.
sleeper.
EU sleeper. Oh man, I'm not really sure. There's so much of EU's just are people have been picking already. I definitely think might be able to grab. Maybe if you're really struggling, probably someone from Unicorns of Love there. Not sure if they'll be picked up. Power Viva will probably be picked up. Kiki's might be picked up. Maybe because of the hype from after the TSM game in IM San Jose. But Vardags and I don't know how to pronounce that. Hillsong?
Yeah, I think so.
The 80 carry and support combo right there. Did pretty well last week. And again, you touched on it, how they're kind of going to have like fairly average weeks throughout out because they have balanced weeks. But
Right.
if you're struggling, they're probably going to be good team to pick up because they're probably going to continue having balanced weeks.
So I think it's kind of hard to find sleeper picks in Europe because you've got Gambit, you've got Meet Your Makers, you've got Copenhagen Wolves, and then you've got that's 3 picks at each position kind of taken up by the waiver wire. You're just never going to pick those players. Again, you could hold on to the Meet Your Makers players as sleepers. You might have someone crazy like me who's like gambling on Copenhagen Wolves, but for the most part, that's a pretty full waiver wire there already. And then you've got H2K and Giants, who are pretty bad. And the team for me that like sneaks in there is Rockhat. I've had a lot to say about how Rockhat is a bad fantasy team, or was last split, but Woolite and Nuke Duck, being very aggressive players, have brought a different style of play to their team. Jankos has always been the first Bloodmaster, and so I feel like any of those 3 picks could actually do pretty well for you. Nuke Duck is probably unlikely to be available, as is Woolite, but Yonko seems like he's open in a lot of leagues, and I think he's going to end up being a surprisingly high-scoring fantasy jungler once Roccat plays against teams that aren't Fnatic. Let's stay in Europe, but switch to the opposite end. What's a player that you think everyone has and should just be getting rid of at this point? And I'm going to give us all a freebie. Wicked has just been disappointed. Like, Elements wins, and Wicked is like, I got 3 points, guys. I was 0-2-1 with 200 CS. And you're like, Wicked, what were you doing the whole game? But I feel like there are other players that should be dropped, or at least you should consider dropping. Anthony, let's go with you first this time.
Are we doing NA or EU?
Let's start with Europe since we're already there.
Okay. Definitely, I'm staying with Freeze over Copenhagen Wolves. I think that he's worth holding on to see how things pan out. Copenhagen Wolves used to be able to put up points despite not winning a lot of games. You look at Woolite from last season, one of the top ADCs, despite everything. I know that Freeze is a little bit more cautious than Woolite, but still got potential there. I would see how things pan out in maybe week 3 or 4, if you can spare that kind of luxury. But I'll definitely see how that pans out, along with Airwax.
Those are players to hold on to?
Yeah.
That you might otherwise drop?
Yeah, depending on your situation. But if you can't afford it, I would hold on to them. At least Freeze.
Okay.
I was just about to say drop Freeze.
Oh.
I'm not fine with Copenhagen Wolves. Like, best Freeze is going to do. Like, I think Woolite's better than Freeze, and he still had fairly average weeks, except for 1 or 2 games per week per like total where he went on like 40 points a game. But overall, I don't see Freeze doing much with Copenhagen Wolves. And you also brought this up earlier, that there aren't really many people that a lot of people are holding on to that are just bad, because the just bad people everybody already knows. Like, you have Gambit, you have CW, you have Meet Your Makers right now, and then like H2K and Giants, people probably not holding on to them right now. So not many people are just holding on to like bad EU players, in my opinion.
The one like set of players that I feel kind of weird about seeing people hold on to is the Unicorns of Love, because they have yet to really have a good fantasy performance. Even in their 1 win, it was like an okay game. So I understand wanting to hold on to them just because of all the hype that's been there, but I feel like there are so many sleepers you could jump onto instead, even if you're looking at just like playing the matchups. Jumping over to North America, what's a player you think people should stop holding on to? I can think of a lot.
I could start.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll probably say Dyrus and Balls, just right there. Those 2 top laners have been pretty mediocre throughout the season so far, and last season as well.
And everyone probably really sees them as like the top.
Well, they probably are the top, just not fantasy.
Right. Anthony?
Definitely Cloud9 players. I think if you just look at week 2, right? If you just look at the game that they completely stomped Team Liquid, you can almost say that's pretty much Cloud9 playing at their best. And even if you replicate that for another game, making that their best week, it's not anything to write home about. It's just not a lot of points that they generate. It's It's almost kind of disappointing because I'm sure there are Cloud9 fans out there just wanting to keep these players and want them to see them do well in both LCS and Fantasy, and that's just not going to happen. Their ceiling is not high. Their floor isn't anything great either. They could serve as pretty good bench options, but if you must hold on to them, sure. But if you're still holding on to them, but there are people that have just much higher potential, definitely go ahead and drop them. I have no problems with it.
I was going to say High. High is kind of the Wicked of Cloud9.
Of mid lane, right?
Where you're just like,
Yeah.
I mean, he is a phenomenal, or has in the past been, and hopefully will continue to be, as Cloud9 hopefully recovers, a phenomenal shot caller, but he's never been that flashy, kill-getting player, right? You look at his moments of brilliance at Worlds, and like, what were High's best plays? They were dying to take out inhibs. Like,
well, he would also play these assassins. Yeah, exactly, right? He would always play these assassins that would go in and, may or may not get one kill and just die. And you don't want to see that. He had one of the most, highest deaths amongst mid laners, and despite having deaths, it's not like he had tons of kills like Woolite as well. So I don't know. He was same as Link in terms of where you would rate mid laners last split. In this split, I think Link, based on COG's performance and everything, I think Link has put some distance between him and High.
It really has, yeah. For me, though, the player to drop in North America is definitely Shifter. I stuck by Shifter all last season. I had him as kind of like my superstitious charm because in week 1 he got that. I think it was a pentakill, right? In week 1, it might have been a
he got a pentakill.
He got a pentakill in week 1, yeah. And he was like, in my head, I was like, Kerp and Shifter are gonna carry me. And every week I was like, Kerp, Shifter. And Kerp would put up like 50 points, and Shifter would be like, here's your 12 points, sir. I'll be on my way. And he was a really, really low scoring fantasy player. He actually, I think, this is off the top of my head, but I think he scored less than High did last season. And this season, his team is not the top of the standings like it was last season for so long, right? They started off 5-2, they were really dominant. This season, Dignitas is 1-3, and their losses are coming to teams that you really don't want to be putting those losses to. Their only win is against Coast, and as we know, even that was weird. And so I just can't see a reason to hold on to Shifter because he's this player that even at his best had like small moments of brilliance, like his Ziggs play in the spring split and that famous Ahri backdoor, but he's never really been this standout, consistent, week in and week out scorer. And now his team is crumbling around him. Now this kind of moves us on to our last point, which is Crumbs. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to make one disclaimer from something Anthony said earlier. Everybody keep Sneaky.
Oh yeah, okay, Sneaky's a big
Cloud9 player.
Definitely.
Everyone else on Cloud9 you can drop, but keep Sneaky. He's gonna.
Yes.
I was actually
points do not apply to Sneaky.
I was kind of talking about this earlier, and when we think about Cloud9, Meteos and Balls, we used to held up as like the players of their position, right? You talk about junglers, and you're like Meteos, everybody else. You talk about top laners in North America, of course. You've got Balls, everybody else. I was never there. And all of a sudden, like, Meteos and Balls are just like these mediocre players at their position. And Sneaky, who was always this AD carry, they're like, yeah, Sneaky's on the team. Now he's just a complete god. So hold on to Sneaky for sure, because if Cloud9 does recover, his fantasy points are going to be through the roof. But I was going to say Shifter, just like looking at Dignitas, Crumbs is leaving. What does that mean for Dignitas? I mean, for me, it's a buck. Like, I can't think of a jungler as long as they don't go out and pick out like Nintendude, who I think is in the hospital right now.
He's still in the ER, I think.
And the odd one, who hasn't played in like a year. Those are pretty much the only two North American junglers I can think of that have professional experience that I would want less than Crumbs. So I feel like this has to be. I know there's going to be some synergy issues. This feels like a buff to Dignitas to me. Crumbs plays a really selfless jungle style where he never ganks. He just wards. He just wards places, and his team suffers from it. Fantasy wise. No, seriously, he just walks around the map warding.
Yeah. He plays a vision game.
Like he plays a vision game where all of his lanes are losing. So I don't know what the vision is for. It's very weird. And I feel like any jungler that's able to put any pressure on, we even saw Shorter Ace, who's this random jungler sub, put pressure on Pobelter, snowball the game into Gravity, who hasn't lost a game since. Yeah. So like, even he, I feel like, could turn Dignitas into. I'm not saying if they pick up Shorter Ace, go out and draft everyone on Dignitas, but please don't do that. But do we think it's enough of a difference? Actually, if you're in my league, please go do that. But do we think picking up a new jungler is enough of a difference?
I'll go first.
And if so, for which players on Dignitas is it worth investing?
Okay, so definitely some other names out there to consider that has LCS experience off the top of my head. ThinkCard for COG, Kaz for Complexity last split. And then you look at another jungle sub from last split was Helios. Helios came in and he didn't immediately just turn EG around or anything, but definitely made a solid impact. And I think the biggest boon to anyone's fantasy value when a new jungler comes in would probably be the mid laner. The mid lane really is a great place for the jungle to make his impact felt. And I think that Crumbs overall, really, from what I gathered from his video and what people have been saying, is that he really didn't have the support of his team, right? He was trying to play this vision style that his team just didn't want to play. And you talked about there not being a lot of synergy if they bring a new jungler, but maybe there wasn't much synergy to begin with. So if it's zero, you're just replacing zero with zero, right? So I don't think there'll be that much of a problem if they pick an experienced jungler, although it could potentially be really shaky if they pick up a new jungler who isn't familiar with LCS, that doesn't have the experience still dealing with nerves or whatever. So I definitely agree with Matthias or Gustav. Definitely is a step in the right direction for Dig's fantasy value.
How could it be okay? Actually, I
can't get any worse.
I have to say,
it can only go up from here.
I really do feel for Crumbs as a jungler who I only play Skarner. So like every time I get in a game, I'm saying, "Hey team, you're playing my style now." And I understand that that's a bad position to be in as a jungler. Imagine back in Season 3 when Meteos was doing that farm style, if his lanes weren't on board, right? If they were like, "Hey Meteos, when are you ganking?" And he's like, "Screw you, I'm farming right now." Like, that's a really bad position to be in as a jungler, yeah. And so I'm glad he's getting out of this situation. I hope we see him on a future team, because that vision style is a cool idea when you have lanes that are dominant. Like, if you put him on... let's pretend Team Impulse we're having the level of play that we expect from Xiao and Impact, of like this dominant lane presence. All of a sudden Crumbs' style would be really cool. So I don't mean like to knock on Crumbs, just it wasn't working for their team. But for me, I don't think it'll be mid lane that's affected. Because Shifter is the most passive mid laner in the game. And I just can't see...
Yeah. Or is he passive due to Crumb's style as well?
I mean, he was passive on Team Coast too. Now, granted, he was jungling with Nintendo then. So...
Has he ever had a good jungler that he can rely on?
I'm not sure. We'll have
we haven't seen that yet, right?
So yeah, so I guess it could be Shorter Ace comes out and all of a sudden Shifter returns to the like second scariest mid laner in North America. But I think what's more likely is Gamsu has actually been playing pretty solidly, despite Dignitas having a rough time, let's say. And also in the bot lane, Kiwi Kid is this massively aggressive support, right? We saw The loss versus Coast, sure, you can say, hey, Coast through, but it was Kiwi Kid that was like, hey, that Ari is 10 feet away from his team. I'm going to flash ult him so we can kill him immediately and win the game. Like, that's a super aggressive player. He's one of the few Annie support mains in North America. So I could see a jungler that's able to put that sort of pressure onto the bot and top lane really snowballing. I haven't seen much out of Core JJ, but could we see Kiwi Kid maybe being like, if Dignitas is putting up wins and you have an aggressive support that likes to initiate, that support's going to get assists, right?
I have a hard time imagining that because he started off with Dignitas getting wins.
Yeah.
I don't think if they bring in a good jungler, whoever that may be, it would mean Dignitas will start winning. I think they're just so far behind. Everyone else pretty much, not everyone else, but most teams have went into week one prepared, ready as a team, and now with a couple games under their belt, they gotten kind of the jitters out of the way. I don't think Dig would catch up right away. They'll probably take another couple games, 2 weeks or so, to just get in the groove before we probably start seeing anything.
Yeah, definitely. Replacing Crumbs. I don't like Crumbs is a great guy. He knows what to do. He sometimes fails at it, but replacing Crumbs has got to be a step up unless you're replacing him with like Nintendo or the odd one, as you said. But I definitely think that, as you said, I think Gamsu's actually the best player on Dignitas right now. He's been playing really well. I think putting in a new jungler will boost Gamsu's points, probably boost everyone else's points as well. But I don't see them being a force really to be reckoned with. Maybe pull out 6 total wins in the season, maybe a bit more. Unless the jungler they pick up ends up just being, I don't know, just the best shot caller.
I can't even think of who that
best
jungler
shot
would be.
caller, best playmaker ever in League of Legends, because Dignitas has a lot of flaws, and it's not on Crumbs that all those flaws are put on. They don't have a playmaker. They don't really have anyone to make plays on their team except for Kiwi Kid, and even then, Kiwi Kid usually falls too far behind in games for him to make plays.
I'm trying to think of unsigned junglers that could come in and shake up Dignitas. And the only really aggressive playmaking jungler I can think of that's not on an LCS team, there's Shorter Ace, who is okay, but he's not gonna turn Dignitas into God all of a sudden. There's Amazing, but he doesn't want to play in North America, it sounds like, after his experience with TSM.
No, he doesn't want to.
Would they be able to sign Amazing?
Oh yeah, they is Amazing an exempt non-resident?
He went back to EU though. Right? Does that go away since he's not on a team?
I'm not
now?
sure. I'm not gonna try and understand those rules.
Yeah.
They're pretty arcane.
Yeah, he's also probably not going to want to come back to North America anyway. So.
Right, that's good enough. I have trouble figuring out who that jungler is that you bring in.
I think one that I was thinking of was possibly Trashy, but I don't know if he wants to leave Enemy to go to Dig. Enemy's looking pretty alright for current CS team, Challenger Series team.
Who's on Final 5 right now? That guy's pretty good.
Was that Shorter Ace?
No, it was Shorter Ace, but he got replaced.
Let's see if I can find it.
And then I'm looking at I'm thinking about the other Challenger teams. Inori is on Roar, I think. And Bishu is on Affinity. And Roar is facing off, I believe, Cloud9 Tempest in the NACS. And they look kind of like the favorites there. So what I'm thinking is Bishu or whatever jungler is on Tempest. Because Affinity is unlikely to advance into the Challenger Series. So there are a couple of junglers there, but I just don't see them as these godlike junglers that you're thinking, now Dignitas is going to be worth picking.
Yeah.
If it is, my guess is it's Gamsu will become an okay...
Someone is mentioning if Azingi's right now is the sub for Dignitas.
He is.
I don't I don't see a Zingy being what Dignitas needs, though.
Yeah, Azingi is like this very
He's
interesting
a-
jungler.
He's a very good solo queue jungler, like, because he pulls out strategies you're not expecting in solo queue, because you're just expecting, hey, they're just going to play standard.
Wouldn't you love
And
to
then
see
he-
Karth as jungle in the LCS though?
Saint might pull it out. He likes it, but
That AP
But yeah.
Amumu.
and then
I'm ready.
if someone picks a Mumu in LCS and the other team doesn't invade or punish that Amumu, probably just going to stop that game right there.
Well,
It's hard to really imagine any good challenger jungler to come on Dig though, because chances are Dig
Yeah.
is gonna get relegated
Yeah,
at the end
that's
of the
the
regular
thing.
season. And
That's the
what's
thing, I'm-
more likely? They go on Dig, try to keep their spot, or be on a good challenger team to knock Dig out of that spot.
Right. Like the jungler I was saying, the Inori, I think, from Roar. It just doesn't
Mhm.
make sense for him to leave because Roar is one of the favorites to get into Challenger. Same goes for Cloud9 Tempest. Although
Yes,
one
and
of them
probably
won't
goes for
be.
Trashy as well.
Right. So it seems like it's this position where your lease is so short that it almost doesn't feel worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't see that making a huge difference. I think Dignitas is still a team to stay away from.
Agreed.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we've
Yeah.
beat this Dignitas horse into the ground a bit too much. But let's just say don't draft Dignitas. Do any of you have any last thoughts of like random sleepers and or players to drop before we go ahead and close this off?
Not really. None that I can think of that much.
Okay,
Probably.
well, if anyone watching has any questions, you can go ahead and tweet them at FantasyRiftCom on Twitter. And we'll be answering any questions that you pose to us on air in our next show, Wednesday, same time, 7 p.m. Pacific. This has been Fantasy Talk. Thanks for watching.